Hi everyone, welcome at Decode. Peter and me are speaking today of something really old. And the most exciting part about it is it's actually an NFT that consists of two contracts and is from the year 2017. Can you guess which contract we are talking about today, Peter?
Is it, I don't know, is it CryptoPunks?
Probably, yeah. So let's jump right into the topic, right? Yeah, basically, as we just said, it's a contract from 2017, right? And since that's quite some time ago and crypto is super fast paced, there wasn't actually a NFT standard, which is today well known under the standard name ERC 721, basically, right? So at that time, they implemented everything themselves. And they basically took the ERC20 standard, which is just a regular token, and modified it so that it behaves somewhat like today's NFTs.
Right, yeah, it's really interesting to see this project because, as Kevin just mentioned, they hadn't the chance to use a standard to implement their project. So they simply had to take what is there and implemented their own stuff. And so they also had no chance to make use of metadata standards, for example. So because they were developed much more later in time. So I think somewhere 2020 or something. And so there was no standard how to define and structure metadata. So they simply had a list of strings which defines the appearance of the NFT without any types and all this stuff. And they also have no chance to implement some token URI or base URI variables in their contract because the simple wasn't the standard for this. So they had to somehow pass around with this lack of standard and did pretty interesting stuff there. So it's really interesting to see this contract in action. They also had no or made not use of Open Zeppelin, which we first thought probably Open Zeppelin wasn't already existing back then, but it was. So the company was founded in 2015. There was also a ERC20 token standard back then, but they didn't make use of it, most likely because it didn't fit their requirements. And they also, for example, made use of or basically self-implemented stuff that were available already. So for example, Ownable. Just to explain what Ownable is, it's a pretty well-used modifier that allows or not allows caller of functions to do something or to do not something. So basically you can say only the owner is allowed to do something, or you can use this modifier also for other stuff, but this is basically how it would work. And they could have made use of it, but they didn't. So it's interesting to see. Maybe they simply didn't know about Open Zeppelin back then because we're all quite new in this time.
Yeah, as we all know, crypto is super fast moving, right? And there's so many technologies out there, and yeah, it wasn't definitely not different back then. And just like they implemented their actual NFT in a custom way because of the time being, basically, they also implemented their own marketplace. And that's the second contract we are talking about today. So basically, they implemented their own on-chain marketplace to basically trade CryptoPunks. And that's actually quite exciting, interesting, because that makes the whole project much more complex and more interesting that they actually got that off the ground, right? Because today's NFTs basically just need to implement the NFT itself and even have some widely used standards, but they had to do everything themselves. That's super interesting. And because of that, that's also unfortunately a huge drawback because we fortunately have standards now like the ERC 721, which is the NFT standard. Modern NFT marketplaces need to manually support those old collections, right? CryptoPunks is fortunately a huge, one of the most known collections. And that's why OpenSea and other marketplaces actually implement their own custom logic. Basically, they specifically call the correct contract methods to actually conduct sales, to do transfers, and so on. And that's what we found very interesting as well.
Absolutely, yes. So basically you can say a marketplace makes use of another marketplace to make this trade happen, right? Because OpenSea, for example, makes use of the CryptoPunks marketplace in order to trade a CryptoPunk. So that's quite interesting. And as Kevin just mentioned, it's really a huge contract in terms of when you compare it with nowadays NFT contract, because as Kevin said, there are simply some things you have to override when you do your own collection, and they really implemented a complete marketplace. So making offers, making bids, matchmaking, transferring ether and all those stuff, and ensuring that everything is correct. So it's really interesting to see, at least as a developer, to see this contract in action and see that it also still works. And so there were no big issues, how it looks like, and it's really interesting. So another for me, or also for Kevin, I think is an interesting thing is that the images itself have no background. So you know those famous pixel images. I don't know how many pixels by many pixels these are, but you know this pixel CryptoPunks, of course, and they have no background. So they are white or simply don't have a background. But you know them probably with a background, and that's simply because a blue background has a meaning, and it means it's not for sale and has no current bids. A red background, for example, means it is for sale, and a purple background basically means they have an active bid. So the appearance of the NFT or of the image does actually also tell the viewer about the marketplace status, so to say. So if it's for sale or not, does it have a bid or not? Is it for sale or not? Yeah, I said it. And so this is quite interesting that they made somehow the marketplace functions and status available in the image as well. So that's also interesting. And of course, marketplaces like OpenSea have to make use of it because they get the images but without a background. And so they need to have a second look. Is this NFT, for example, for sale? Then they apply the correct background color. And this background color is also, for example, defined in the data contract that Kevin mentioned. And so this is quite interesting as well. Another thing is that they also made use of the withdrawal pattern for their marketplace. So it's best practice to use or implement it. So it basically means that the receiver of a money has to claim it on its own and not is actively getting it. So in the contract, there's simply a variable that says, okay, user A, for example, has the right to withdraw amount X, but he doesn't get actively. So he needs to be there and say, hey, I want my money, and then he gets it. And that's a good security pattern. And it's interesting that they already implemented it back then.
Definitely, yeah. And another thing that we found super interesting is basically what many larger collections like Bored Ape Yacht Club, Other Side, and so on usually also do is they have some sort of hash mechanism to verify the integrity of the metadata, right? And CryptoPunks itself also already had that mechanism. So what they did basically, they have one large image where all the CryptoPunks are aligned next to each other, and they hashed this image and saved it into the smart contract. So basically what that does is it helps you, especially as an early investor maybe, to actually verify or see that the images the project owners probably, for example, stated that they upload into the contract are basically what they promised to, right? And that's an interesting thing. And relating to that, the metadata itself, like how the CryptoPunks itself looks like, is 100% on-chain, right? We had that already. And usually in today's NFTs, if you have on-chain metadata, the metadata itself is usually, or most of the time, not always, also generated on-chain, meaning that you have some sort of randomness with so-called oracles. That's some sort of like a gateway to the external world that loads off-chain data into the contract. But in this case, they basically have on-chain metadata, but generated the metadata, like the image data, off-chain, and then just saved like the byte data, like really the lowest level information possible into the smart contract to then give it a great look. And that's interesting as well.
Sure. So this was our second episode on our podcast Decode, smart contract analysis for non-tech people. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode about analyzing an OG in this space, so CryptoPunks. It's really, from a developer perspective, a very interesting contract. As we said, they implemented, for example, an on-chain marketplace and have this marketplace status encoded somehow in the image background, as I told you. And yeah, we hope that you gained something new out of it. We are pretty sure that you did, because not all people know about the CryptoPunks specifics. And so, we hope you liked and enjoyed it, and see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for watching, and it was a pleasure again, Peter. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.